It's the same fight everywhere, but halfway or truly home. 3 bronzes leave an American museum for India in 2026, but one stays on loan. Aboriginal spears stolen from Australia's first landing return to Aboriginal hands, and Benin royals reclaim palace loot. You see, there's a kind of history that refuses to die. You can ban the language, you can burn the libraries and rename the streets, but the story still throbs in the hearts of the songs and in the chants of the mantras, and in the way we pause to thank the very ground that we walk on. Good day, namaste. You're listening to the Mitra Desai Show, and I'm your friend and host, Mitra. On this show, we follow the traces of civilizations that have survived erasure and kept remaking themselves, from Bharat to Australia and beyond. Today, I want to sit with one question. For our stolen Devi Devatas or the Aboriginal sacred objects or the royal bronzes, do we repatriate them to museums or restore them to mandirs and communities? Today, we're talking about global returns of sacred thefts, from Tamil murtis to the Gavigal spears to the Benin bronzes. Now, most people see repatriation as a simple museum swap. So basically a legal victory on paper. But here's the deeper truth. True restoration is what revives temples and communities, like the Nataraja that was welcomed back with tears in Kallidaikurichi. I have woven these threads together from a recent Smithsonian announcement to the journals of 1770. Let us walk through it. The halfway traps of one model and the life-restoring power of another. Let's start with the 3 bronzes from Tamil Nadu and contrast them with a story that shows what a full restoration could really mean. In January 2026, Washington's National Museum of Asian Art, part of the Smithsonian Institution, agreed to return 3 temple bronzes. One was a 10th century Chola Nataraj, another a 12th century Somaskanda from the Vishwanath Swami temple, and the third one is a 16th century Sundarar and Paravai from the Vijayanagar period. Researchers like S. Vijay Kumar from the India Pride Project matched them exactly to the black and white photos taken between 1956 and 1959 by the French Institute of Pondicherry and India's Archaeological Survey. These showed the murtis were installed in their Tamil Nadu temples. They were illicitly removed after independence. The Nataraja itself was bought by the museum in 2002 from the Doris Wiener Gallery in New York. A dealer later linked to antiquities trafficking with falsified paperwork that the Smithsonian itself acknowledged. Now India gains legal ownership of all 3. Yet the Nataraja will remain on long-term display in Washington, while the other 2 are headed home, most likely to government custody or national museums. But it still leaves the Devatas far from any Garbhagriha. Now compare this to the Kallidaikurichi in the Tirunelveli district, where the 16th century Nataraja was stolen from the temple in 1982. Now it spent 2 decades in an art gallery here in Australia. In 2019, Australia returned this murti. Now, it did not remain in a Chennai warehouse or some central museum. It eventually went to its home mandir. When the pujaris and the communities there opened it, villages gathered, lamps were lit, garlands, chants, and everyone's eyes were moist with tears. The community came together for darshan. Now, not only has the daily worship resumed in full, pilgrims have started to come from afar, and locals speak of the temple having revived the very soul of that village. This is restoration. So the murti, the people, and the sacred space comes alive again. This Tamil homecoming shares similarities with a story from Australia's east coast. You see, in 1770, when Captain James Cook arrived in his Endeavour ship and anchored it at Kami Bay or Botany Bay, the hunting grounds belonged to the Gavigal clan of the Dharawal people. Now, 2 Gavigal men stood on the beach with spears. They were signaling to the strangers to stay away. Cook fired his musket, wounding at least one, and his crew later raided a shelter, taking about 40 spears. These spears were used for hunting and ceremony and are considered sacred objects. Some of them ended up at Trinity College in Cambridge, and they were loaned to its museums. Sacred objects are also called ancestors. For over 2 centuries, the Gavigal descendants saw their ancestors only behind the glass cases. After decades of advocacy, 4 spears returned in 2024 to the La Perouse Aboriginal community near Kame itself. Through ceremonies with the Australian National Maritime Museum and the University of Sydney, it was the elders who took charge of these spears. They led the moment as healing. Now, community decisions guide their care and display, not a distant national institution alone. This pattern of spears returning to the land echoes the scale of destruction in West Africa. There, in 1897, a British punitive expedition burnt Benin City's royal palace and looted between 3,000 to 5,000 bronzes, plaques of ceremonies, cast heads of kings and ancestors, and even carved ivory tusks. All of this was to seize trade and control in what is now southern Nigeria. These items were scattered in museums in London, Berlin, and beyond. But recent pressures brought change. Germany returned significant numbers from its public collections. The Smithsonian sent back 29 bronzes to Nigeria. The country now builds museums while debating where to house these traditional treasures. Who holds the final say? Is it the community of origin or the centralized displays? Side by side, these incidents reveal 2 models of return. Now, model 1 is from the museum to the state to another museum. So ownership shifts legally, but the object still remains as an exhibit, like the Smithsonian Nataraja on loan or the bronzes in the national halls. Model 2 is a full cultural restoration. Back to specific temples, lands, communities, or elders, it resumes its sacred role. So you see, repatriation fixes the titles, restoration restarts the heartbeat. For murtis with clear temple provenance, like those 3 bronzes, settling for museums, even Indian ones, kind of repeats the colonial views of our devatas as merely art. In my view, only when the grief is acknowledged and the dignity restored can a more honest conversation unfold. So that was the story of our murtis, Aboriginal spears, and African bronzes returning. You now know that there are 2 models, museum repatriation versus a living restoration, and the introspection this demands from us. So if you've liked the information in the podcast, make sure you drop me a comment below. Share this episode to start a conversation. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.